On a Saturday afternoon, more than 60 shoppers pushed their carts beneath the humming lights of Greenway Market. They clipped coupons, weighed apples, and thought nothing of the man restocking bottles of cleaner near the back aisle. Marcus Reed had been overlooked, whispered about, and discarded. But he had not discarded them. Every slight, every laugh, every closed schedule shift was copied into a small spiral notebook he called his register of debts. He knew which families shopped that day. He knew when the last cart rolled in. And when the doors slid shut and locked, the aisles stopped being aisles. They became corridors of fire. The sprinkler pipes stayed dry, the alarms rang hollow, and the walls seemed to sweat with fuel. The supermarket was no longer a store. It was a furnace built from resentment, ritual, and revenge. This is the story of Marcus Reed, the silent stalker with a ledger, and the day discounts turned into death. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. The doors hissed open and shut like lungs. Every 3 seconds, glass parted, bodies flowed in, glass sealed again. Mothers pushed strollers. Teenagers dragged carts with bags of ice. A man in a suit carried nothing but a single bottle of wine. The hum of the ceiling lights mixed with the quick beep of scanners. Plastic crinkled as bags filled. A faint citrus smell drifted from the fruit section, sharp against the cooler breath of the frozen aisle. It was 2 p.m. on a Saturday. Greenway Market was alive with the rhythm of routine. Children tugged on their parents for candy. Cashiers smiled, their hands moving fast over the register keys. A song played softly over the speakers, interrupted every few minutes by an announcement about weekend discounts. The community had gathered inside without thought. They trusted the doors to open. They trusted the space to be safe. At the back, near the rows of bleach and sanitizer, Marcus Reed restocked shelves. His vest sagged from repeated washings, the fabric thinned at the collar. He lifted each bottle with care, aligning the labels so they faced outward in perfect rows. The same movements over and over. His hands smelled faintly of solvent. When customers passed, he looked down, adjusting the bottles again. Few noticed him. Fewer spoke. The lights above flickered once. A child laughed at the sound of a balloon squeaking against the floor. The rhythm returned, the noise of life too steady to be broken by a tremor in the grid, but Marcus heard it. He placed the last bottle on the shelf and pressed the cap until it clicked. By 2:15 p.m., carts crowded the checkout lanes. The scanners beeped faster, overlapping into a nervous music. The air thickened with mixed scents, fresh bread, floor cleaner, and the faint smoke of rotisserie chicken spinning behind glass. The doors at the front slid open for a man in a baseball cap, then shut behind him. They opened again for a woman holding coupons folded like origami, then sealed once more. Each time they parted, they carried the weight of memory. Every insult, every locked shift schedule, every whispered word. The list was long, and the list was his. The glass moved again. Another customer entered. The doors sighed shut. At 2:23 p.m., Marcus walked quietly toward the front, a set of keys hidden in his palm. He paused near the customer service desk, watching the light fall across the doors. Shoppers streamed in and out. One cart squealed from a bad wheel. The manager called someone over the intercom. Marcus lowered his hand, slid the key into the control box on the side panel, and twisted. The sound was small, mechanical, nearly drowned out by chatter and laughter, a click precise and final. The next customer reached for the doors. They did not move. She stepped back, tried again. The glass stayed sealed. Behind her, another man pressed his cart forward, expecting the barrier to part. It remained still. The hum of the ceiling lights continued, indifferent. The alarm bell above the frame stayed silent. People looked at one another with nervous smiles, assuming a glitch. Someone said, "Try again." A hand slapped the glass. Nothing. The doors reflected only the fluorescent glow, the shoppers inside staring back at themselves. The rhythm had broken. The breathing of the building had stopped. Marcus turned away, his vest brushing against the edge of the counter. The citrus smell was gone now, swallowed by something sharper. The crowd shifted uneasily. The click echoed in their memory, though few realized they had heard it. The doors that had always opened now refused. The flyer arrived in every mailbox on Friday morning. Glossy paper, folded once with bold red numbers promising weekend bargains. Families tore it open at breakfast. Fathers circled discounts with ballpoint pens. Mothers clipped coupons and tucked them between recipe cards. Children folded the page into squares and slipped it into school bags. Some taped it to the refrigerator door, others pressed it between the pages of a Bible. It was more than paper. It was trust printed in ink. By noon the town had carried the flyers to Greenway Market. The parking lot filled in steady waves. Engines cooled, doors slammed, carts rattled across asphalt. The glass doors at the front breathed open and shut, swallowing the community whole. Inside, the hum of freezers and the scent of warm bread wrapped around them like ritual. Cashiers greeted by name. "Morning, Mrs. Turner. How's your boy doing in school?" They remembered the digits on loyalty cards before customers reached for their wallets. A security guard held the door longer than needed, bowing slightly as an old woman with a cane shuffled through. Teenagers bagging groceries carried boxes to cars for the elderly, waving off tips with nervous smiles. For many, the market was not a business. It was an extension of their homes. The flyers reinforced the illusion. They promised savings on milk, meat, detergent. They spoke of stability. Neighbors compared them in line, holding paper against paper like a shared code. One man whispered, "They always honor what they print." No one doubted it. In the bakery, heat from the ovens drifted into the aisles. The air smelled of yeast and sugar. A boy pressed his face against the glass case, fogging it with his breath while his mother chose rolls from a basket. In the produce section, misters hissed over lettuce and cucumbers, sending a cool spray across hands reaching for fruit. The fluorescent lights above buzzed, constant and pale, reflecting on polished tiles. Every sound belonged. The scrape of cartwheels, the beep of scanners, the rustle of bags sliding from metal hooks. Marcus Reed stocked shelves in silence. He moved unnoticed behind towers of cereal and detergent. His vest carried faint stains no one commented on. He aligned cans until their labels formed a wall of identical faces. Customers stepped past him, eyes fixed on their lists. They held flyers folded tight in their palms. He held nothing. Memory clung to the aisles. For some, it was a child's first allowance spent on candy. For others, the market was the place they bought flowers before funerals. The building carried birthdays, storms, holidays, each etched into the quiet repetition of commerce. The flyers served as reminders that time moved forward, but the ritual stayed the same. Every week, a new promise, the same walls. At 3 p.m., the air conditioning roared to a colder setting. Shoppers shivered, rubbing arms. The scent of bleach from the cleaning aisle bled faintly into the scent of oranges piled in pyramids. A cashier sneezed. Coins clinked into a tray. The world held together. Outside, wind carried scraps of flyers across the lot. One was pressed against a windshield wiper, fluttering like a flag. Another stuck to the damp pavement near the loading dock, tire marks running across its promises. The paper tore easily under rubber and heat. No one picked it up. By 3:15 p.m., the crowd inside thickened. Voices overlapped into a low storm of chatter. The flyers emerged from pockets and purses, smoothed out on conveyor belts. Cashiers scanned them, tore corners, placed stamps. Each piece of paper traveled through human hands as if blessed, marked, returned. Near the exit, a bulletin board displayed old flyers pinned in rows. Some edges curled yellow, others faded. A few bore children's drawings, colored crayons over product images. Shoppers rarely looked at it, but it remained, proof of continuity. Marcus paused there once. He stared at the overlapping sheets. He reached out, touched one with his fingertip, then pulled back. The edges were brittle. The ink smudged under pressure. He walked away. By 3:30 p.m., only one flyer remained on the floor beneath the board. Its corner curled upward, blackened. The lower edge carried a singed mark, crisp and brittle like burned cloth. No one noticed. The flyer lay half intact, half consumed, as if it had been written not as a promise but as a will. Marcus Reed's uniform vest was once crisp, its green fabric stiff with starch, the company logo bright on the chest. He wore it proudly in his first months. Colleagues remembered him as the one who stayed late to help unload trucks, who stacked crates without complaint, who gave up breaks so others could rest. He joked with baggers, carried groceries for elderly shoppers, and stayed calm when registers jammed. The vest marked him as reliable. It was his badge of belonging. At home, he washed it every night. He hung it on a wire hanger above the bathroom door, letting the steam from hot showers press the wrinkles out. The fabric smelled faintly of detergent and the metallic tang of the coin laundromat. Each morning he slipped his arms into it, buttoned it tight, and stepped back into the fluorescent light of Greenway Market. But memory does not hold steady. His wife filed for divorce. Papers arrived folded flat, smelling of toner and courtroom dust. He signed them with a borrowed pen, the ink bleeding slightly into the paper. Soon after, the court took his visitation rights. Photographs of his son were placed in a box he rarely opened. The sound of laughter in the house was replaced by silence and the buzz of a refrigerator motor. Debt followed. Bills arrived in envelopes stamped with red warnings. Interest added weight to each number. He spread the envelopes across the kitchen table, aligning them like he aligned cans on a shelf, making lists of what he could not pay. His hands shook as he folded them back, placing them in a drawer already crowded with unopened warnings. The vest still hung on its wire, but the fabric wore thin. The pocket near the chest frayed, loose threads curling like veins. He pressed them flat each night, but they lifted again by morning. The company gave out new uniforms every 2 years. His request for a replacement was ignored. A manager once laughed when Marcus pointed at the tear. "It still covers you, doesn't it?" The words stayed longer than they should have. He continued to wash it. He brushed lint from the collar. He patched the hem with crooked stitches. The vest became more than clothing. It was a mask he could not remove. Each shift he pulled it on and stepped into the aisles as if entering a stage. Customers passed by without seeing him. Colleagues forgot his name, calling him stock guy. The vest no longer gave him identity. It erased it. On nights when storms rattled the thin windows of his apartment, he sat at the table with the vest folded before him. He traced the company logo with his finger, the fabric soft from wear. In the background, television static filled the silence. He wrote in his spiral notebook, copying schedules, insults, and small humiliations, each entry a line on a menu of debts. The vest lay beside the notebook, its threads unraveling further with each page. One winter evening, the heat in his apartment failed. The air turned sharp and cold. He lit a candle on the table, the flame flickering against the green cloth. The wax dripped slowly, hardening into ridges. He held the vest closer to the light, watching shadows crawl through the frayed pocket. His hands tightened on the fabric. At 11 p.m., he pulled a lighter from a drawer. He clicked it once, the spark brief. He clicked again, a steady blue flame rising. He lowered it toward the hem of the vest, the worn threads trembling. The fabric caught for a second, curling, releasing the smell of scorched polyester. He watched the line of fire crawl an inch before pinching it out with his fingers. His skin stung. The vest carried a faint black scar near the seam, a wound hidden among folds. He folded it carefully, smoothed the edges, and hung it back on the wire hanger. The flame's reflection still burned in his eyes. The sound of the click lingered like thunder trapped inside walls. The next morning he buttoned the vest over his shirt, the singed edge brushing against his skin. The market's lights buzzed overhead, indifferent. Customers filed in with flyers in hand, never noticing the faint smell of smoke that clung to him. The vest was no longer protection. It was a chain. It carried the memory of fire. That night in the dim glow of his kitchen, the lighter clicked again. Flames licked the green fabric and golden light filled his gaze. Marcus Reed began with experiments. In his apartment kitchen, he poured clear liquid from a plastic bottle into a chipped cup. He struck a lighter and lowered it toward the rim. The flame caught, thin at first, then spread across the surface with a soft hiss. Blue edged into yellow. Heat shimmered against the tiled wall. The cup softened, sagging under its own weight. He set it on the floor and watched the fire creep across the grout line, a narrow vein of blackened soot. When the plastic collapsed, he stamped it out with his shoe. The smell of melted resin clung to the air. He repeated the process night after night, a capful poured on a rag, a full bottle emptied onto a plate. He adjusted distance, timing, ignition. Each trial added to his silent list. He noted which surfaces caught quickly, which resisted, which smoked before flame. The notebook on the counter filled with brief words, fast, slow, dense, spread. His handwriting was tight, letters pressed into the paper until the page tore. At the market, he studied movements. The flow of shoppers peaked on Saturdays between 2 p.m. and 4 p.m. Families arrived in clusters. Children leaned out of carts, touching shelves with sticky hands. Teenagers roamed in pairs, scanning aisles without buying. Cashiers grew flustered, voices rising as lines stretched. It was the storm's eye, the moment when control slipped. Marcus walked the aisles with a mop bucket, watching the current of bodies. He saw where the traffic jammed, where carts collided, where no one looked down. He positioned cleaning fluid bottles on his cart as if restocking. The clear plastic glinted under the lights. The liquid inside swayed with each step, tapping faintly against the sides. He imagined them not as tools but as fuel. He slid them onto low shelves, aligning labels forward, just as he had done with canned goods. No one questioned it. To them he was still invisible, still masked by the uniform vest. At night he returned to the control box near the entrance doors. He knelt with a rag in hand, pretending to polish the metal. His fingers brushed the switch beneath. A simple lever, almost insignificant. He flicked it once, listening for the shift in gears. The glass doors froze, stuck mid-breath, before sliding back into rhythm when he reversed it. The sound was sharp, mechanical, like a lock snapping shut. He memorized the pressure needed, the angle, the weight of the key. The resentment built inside him like a storm. Each mockery from managers, each cut shift, each ignored request replayed in the fluorescent light. They layered over the hum of coolers and the beep of scanners. The list inside his notebook grew longer. He read it at night with the vest folded beside him, the faint black scar at its hem brushing his fingertips. He imagined the names written in flames instead of ink. On Thursday evening he lingered after closing. The aisles were empty, shelves half restocked. The air smelled of disinfectant and old bread. He poured a thin line of fluid across the floor near the frozen section. He struck his lighter and touched the stream. Fire raced forward, devouring the liquid in a hiss. It reached the end, flared against the baseboard, and died when the fuel ended. Marcus crouched low, eyes level with the flame as it crawled, his face reflected in the glossy tile. The fire wrote its own list across the floor before dissolving to smoke. He opened the doors to let the smell drift out, spraying deodorizer into the air as if masking a spill. No one asked questions the next morning. Friday brought fresh flyers, stacked at the customer service desk. He watched customers tear them from racks, fold them into purses. The weekend promise was set. Saturday would draw the largest crowd in weeks. His notebook lay in his locker, page edges curled from the pressure of his pen. Between numbers and times, he had drawn crude maps of aisles, circles where shelves narrowed, where carts blocked paths. Each mark was deliberate, each mark a future fire. That night he lined his apartment floor with bottles. The labels caught the dim light of a single bulb, identical faces in rows. He unscrewed caps, one after another, inhaling the raw sting that rose. His hands smelled of alcohol, sharp and sterile. He wiped them on his pants, then sat with his lighter. He clicked it, held it close, extinguished it, then clicked again. The rhythm matched the sound of the doors opening and closing in his mind. On Saturday morning he arrived early. The market smelled of floor wax and fryer oil warming in the deli. He wheeled a cart stacked with cleaner bottles down the center aisle. To passing eyes, it was routine. To him, it was preparation. He placed bottles on end caps at corners, at spots where the crowd would thicken. He crouched low, setting them as though wiping spills. His hands moved with precision, the bottles blending into the scenery of commerce. By 1:30 p.m., families filled the aisles. Children cried for candy. Coupons rustled. The hum of refrigerators drowned soft clicks. Marcus paused at the door control box, cloth in hand, his key hidden in his palm. He polished metal as before, eyes steady. He shifted the lever, hearing the lock engage with a quiet snap. The doors kept moving, their rhythm unchanged, but now they answered to his hand alone. At 1:45 p.m. he returned to the cleaner cart. A wheel squeaked as it turned. One bottle tipped, sliding from the edge. It rolled across the polished floor, the cap striking tile. It stopped against a stroller. A doll lay inside, eyes open, plastic face pressed to the glass of the bottle. The liquid shimmered in the light. The stroller stood still. The doll's painted smile reflected against the plastic curve. 2:07 p.m. The hum of the freezers filled the air, constant as breath. Families moved through the aisles in slow tides. Coupons fluttered against conveyor belts. Carts bumped, apologized for, and kept rolling. The smell of rotisserie chicken drifted outward, heavy with grease and salt. Marcus Reed stood at the far end of aisle 5. His lighter rested in his palm, thumb brushing the wheel. 2:11 p.m. A girl leaned over a cart, candy clutched in her hand. Her mother shook her head, folding a flyer back into her purse. The fluorescent lights flickered once, then steadied. Marcus clicked the lighter. A spark hissed, died. He clicked again, the sound lost in the shuffle of feet. 2:14 p.m. A drop of clear liquid spread across the tile near the cereal display. He lowered the lighter. The flame caught with a small bloom, orange pressed against white. It crawled along the thin line of fuel, licking at the base of the shelf. A faint crackle joined the hum of machines. No one noticed. 2:16 p.m. Smoke curled beneath the lowest row of boxes. A man bent for a package, paused, sniffed. He frowned, shook his head, and placed the box in his cart. The smoke thinned, almost invisible. Marcus's lighter snapped shut. His thumb pressed it like a pulse. 2:19 p.m. The first cough broke the rhythm. A woman pushing a stroller wiped her eyes, blaming perfume or dust. Behind her, a cashier sneezed twice in quick bursts. The music overhead played through static. Marcus clicked the lighter again. The flame danced over another seam of liquid. A second line caught. 2:21 p.m. A boy shouted, "Fire!" His voice cracked with excitement more than fear. Heads turned. Shoppers laughed it off until the boy pointed. Flames licked higher, yellow against cardboard. Parents pulled their children close. The first alarmed voices rose. 2:23 p.m. A manager rushed forward, tie swinging, shoes squeaking. He yelled, "Get an extinguisher." 2 clerks sprinted to the wall box. They pulled down red canisters, yanked pins, and squeezed. Nothing came out. The handles pressed flat against empty weight. The canisters rattled hollow. Marcus had drained them days before. The clerks looked at each other, panic widening their eyes. 2:25 p.m. The fire climbed. Boxes blackened, plastic wrap shrank and popped. The air thickened with the smell of burnt sugar and glue. Shoppers began coughing harder. Children cried. A man slammed his cart into the front doors, expecting glass to part. It did not move. He shoved again, harder. The door stayed sealed. 2:27 p.m. Screams cut through the aisle. Smoke grew darker, spilling upward toward ceiling vents. Sprinkler heads stared down, cold and silent. Parents pressed jackets over their children's mouths. The floor grew slick underfoot where fuel spread. Marcus stood still, lighter in hand. The flame reflected in his eyes, steady as memory. 2:29 p.m. An old man fell to his knees, clutching his chest. His wife screamed his name, pounding on the locked doors with open palms. The glass vibrated but did not yield. Behind them, shoppers rammed carts into the emergency exit. The bar refused to budge. The air filled with metallic pounding, desperate and dull. 2:32 p.m. A child shrieked as the smoke rolled lower. Her father hoisted her onto his shoulders, head tilted back, searching for clear air. His eyes streamed tears. The crowd swayed, pressing toward the doors in waves. The lighter clicked open again. Marcus lowered it to another seam. Flame traced his design, connecting one aisle to the next. 2:35 p.m. The ceiling lights dimmed behind smoke. The supermarket became a tunnel of orange and black. The shelves glowed, shadows dancing along walls. A plastic doll toppled from a stroller, its painted face melting, eyes collapsing inward. Shoppers stampeded, cries rising above the roar. 2:37 p.m. Someone shouted, "Break it!" A group lifted a cart and slammed it into the front glass. The pane cracked, spiderwebbing outward. A second blow widened the fracture. Still it held, refusing to shatter. People pressed against it, their hands bleeding against sharp lines. 2:40 p.m. Marcus clicked the lighter open and closed, a rhythm like a heartbeat. The flame glowed blue, then orange, then vanished. He clicked again, listening to the sound beneath the chaos. The notebook in his locker carried every name. The aisles now carried his fire. 2:42 p.m. The roar deepened. Plastic signage above aisles curled and dropped, landing in burning fragments. The floor vibrated under collapsing shelves. The crowd pressed forward again, bodies packed tight, air thin. A boy choked, his voice swallowed by smoke. His mother screamed until her throat broke. 2:44 p.m. A single spark leapt from Marcus's hand. It touched a puddle near the detergent display. The fire exploded upward, igniting bottles, plastic bursting like grenades. A rush of heat slammed the aisle, knocking back those who stood too close. The lighter clicked again, and the aisle turned into a tunnel of fire. 2:45 p.m. The fire alarm bell shrieked above the aisles, a metallic cry that drilled into ears and rattled nerves. Its sound cut through screams and crashing carts, but the sprinklers above remained dry. Shoppers stared at the nozzles, waiting for water that never came. The bell rang again, constant, merciless, echoing against glass doors that refused to open. Smoke thickened into black coils. It poured across the ceiling and rolled downward like a slow tide. The air turned heavy, bitter with melted plastic. Every breath scraped throats raw. The taste of burning chemicals coated tongues and teeth. Children gagged, clutching at their parents' sleeves. A man tore his shirt, pressing it to his daughter's face. His knuckles left streaks of soot as he held her close. At 2:47 p.m., the first fire engine turned into the parking lot. Its siren wailed, scattering pedestrians who had escaped the initial wave of panic. Dozens were already outside, coughing, their faces streaked with ash. Some knelt on the asphalt, gasping for air. Others screamed for those still trapped. Drivers trying to flee clogged the exit lanes. The engine braked hard, trapped in a river of cars, its horn blaring. Red lights strobed against windshields. Firefighters leapt from the rig before it stopped moving. They hauled hoses toward the sliding doors, but smoke pressed against the glass like a second skin. Shadows of bodies inside struck at the barrier with fists and carts. The firefighters swung axes. Blades cracked the panes, spiderwebs spreading, but tempered glass held longer than expected. Shouts rose on both sides, muffled, frantic, overlapping. At 2:50 p.m., paramedics set up a triage zone on the asphalt. Folding stretchers slapped open. Blankets unrolled onto the ground. A nurse shouted names over the chaos, searching for answers. Parents dragged children forward, their hair matted with soot, eyes glazed. Roman IV bags hung from improvised stands, clear liquid dripping into trembling arms. Defibrillators hummed, pads pressed to bare chests, shocks delivered in jolts that snapped bodies upward. Needles pierced skin. Hands pumped sternums in rhythm with the alarm bell still screaming inside. The smoke spread beyond the doors now, seeping into the lot. It carried the smell of scorched sugar, gasoline, and flesh. Wind carried it over cars, staining the afternoon sky gray. Firefighters shouted orders, voices hoarse. One climbed a ladder to smash a high window. Glass rained down, shards clattering across pavement. A blast of heat rolled outward, pushing back the crowd. People stumbled, shielding their faces. Inside, the storm worsened. Flames chewed through shelves. Bottles of detergent burst, feeding fire with chemical bursts. Signs dropped from ceilings, edges glowing red before snapping loose. Shoppers crawled on hands and knees, searching for cleaner air below the smoke. Some reached the doors, pounding with bloodied fists, faces pressed against glass already hot to the touch. Their eyes bulged, staring outward, their mouths opening in silent pleas. At 2:55 p.m., another engine screeched into place. Its hose blasted water against the fractured glass, but the angle was wrong. The water hissed into steam, swallowed before reaching the flames. Firefighters cursed, turned their nozzles toward the roof, trying to contain spread. The sound of shattering wood beams punctuated the roar. Sparks rained like meteors. The bell above the doors still screamed, its pulse refusing to stop. Paramedics rushed stretchers back and forth. A boy no older than 10 convulsed as oxygen flowed into his lungs. A woman collapsed beside him, her flyer still clutched in her burned hand. Its paper flaked into ash even as she gasped. A nurse shouted for more Roman 4. A man tried to run back toward the smoke, screaming a name. Police grabbed him, held him down on the asphalt. His voice broke, dissolving into sobs that matched the rhythm of sirens. At 3 p.m., one firefighter broke away. He crouched near the control box hidden beside the ruined doors. His gloved hand pounded against the panel. The cover fell open with a metallic snap. Inside, wires glinted red in the strobe lights. The lever sat twisted sharply to one side. He froze, staring. It was not a malfunction. It was deliberate. "The lever's been turned," he said, his voice flat through the mask. Another firefighter leaned over, eyes narrowing as he saw the angle. It had been wrenched into manual, locked against release. The discovery rippled outward. The chaos seemed to pause for a breath, the alarm bell hammering through the silence that followed. Smoke curled over the scene like ink in water. Shouts resumed, louder, tinged with rage. The firefighter's glove pressed harder against the lever, trying to force it back. It held for a moment, then shifted, gears groaning. The doors juddered, squealing under strain. The crowd inside pressed harder, faces ghostly through smoke. But the truth was already known. The lever was no accident. Someone had turned freedom into a lock. 3:18 p.m. The fire still raged inside Greenway Market. Smoke poured through shattered glass, staining the sky gray. Sirens wailed across the lot, overlapping with cries from the triage zone. Amid the storm, Marcus Reed sat on the curb near the loading dock. His vest was streaked with soot, one pocket torn. His face glistened with sweat and ash. His hands rested on his knees, palms up, empty. He did not move. Police approached with weapons drawn. Their boots crunched on broken glass. One shouted for him to get down. Marcus raised his wrists without hesitation. The cuffs clicked shut around them, the metal cutting against skin already burned at the edges. He turned his head toward the shattered facade, then spoke in a voice flat and steady. "They never opened the door for me." The words carried across the noise, sharp enough for nearby officers to hear. They pulled him to his feet. His shoes left black smears on the concrete. Paramedics watched, pausing in their work for a second, then bent back to patients on the ground. Marcus was led past stretchers where children lay with oxygen masks, past mothers screaming names into the smoke, past firefighters dragging limp bodies toward waiting ambulances. He did not look at them. His eyes fixed on the ground, the cuffs binding him like a mask he finally agreed to wear. At 3:25 p.m. he was placed in the back of a patrol car. The seat squeaked under his weight. The officer closed the door, sealing him in a cage of plexiglass. Through the side window, flames reflected in waves, distorted by heat. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead against the glass, the ash on his skin leaving a smear behind. The car did not move. The chaos outside forced it still. Detectives arrived within the hour. They demanded his locker be opened. A key was pulled from his vest. Inside, the spiral notebook lay at the bottom, edges curled, cover stained with fingerprints. It smelled faintly of cleaner and smoke. They carried it to a folding table set up by the command post, flipping pages with gloved hands. The entries were meticulous. Names of employees written in block letters, some underlined, some crossed out. Next to them, small symbols: a circle, a triangle, a line slashed across. Interspersed were coupons taped in, slashed through with thick black marker. Pages turned, revealing customer names, not just staff. Beside each, numbers that looked like dates. One detective frowned. He whispered to another. They realized the numbers were birthdays, each written with precision. Children's birth dates, old couples' anniversaries, milestones recorded. Marcus had been building not just a list of debts, but a calendar of lives. The market itself had become his ledger. At 4:10 p.m., an investigator asked him about the notebook. Marcus only shrugged. His eyes drifted toward the burning shell of Greenway Market. Smoke climbed behind him like a storm cloud. The officer pressed again, voice harder. Marcus turned slightly, lips dry, voice low. "It was my menu." He said nothing else. They paged through more. One coupon glued to a page was charred at the edges, its printed discount illegible. Another page carried shifts copied from an old schedule, with excess marking dates he had been passed over. The notebook grew darker the deeper they read. The ink pressed harder into the paper, tearing holes. Every mark spoke of resentment layered into ritual. At 4:30 p.m. he was transferred to the station. Cameras flashed as he was led inside. Reporters shouted questions, words drowned by sirens outside. He did not answer. He walked with head down, cuffs tight. His vest was removed, dropped into an evidence bag. He wore only a stained undershirt now, the uniform stripped away. In the interrogation room, the notebook lay on the table, pages curled upward in the dry air. The detectives circled it like an artifact. Marcus sat silent, hands folded, eyes tracing the spiral binding. The clock on the wall ticked. A fan hummed overhead, moving the heat but not the tension. An officer finally asked, "Why birthdays?" Marcus lifted his head. His eyes were hollow, voice steady. "Because they remembered theirs. No one remembered mine." He leaned back, the chair creaking under his weight. He said nothing more. They turned to the final page. It carried no names, no dates, no coupons. Only a single word, written in letters thick and crooked, pressed into the paper so hard it nearly tore through. Everyone. The trial opened on a gray morning. Rain streaked the courthouse steps, dripping from umbrellas held by reporters. Cameras flashed as Marcus Reed was led inside. His wrists were chained, his uniform vest long since sealed in an evidence bag. He wore a plain jumpsuit now, the mask of work replaced with the mask of confinement. The gallery was already full. Parents clutched framed photographs of children. Some wept silently, some stared at the defense table with eyes like glass. Inside the courtroom, the walls smelled faintly of varnish and paper. The wooden benches creaked as families shifted, holding their grief in their laps. On the prosecution's table, evidence lay arranged in careful order. Among it, sealed in plastic, was a small slip of paper. A receipt charred black at the edges. Its ink was smeared but legible. A lighter purchased at 11:36 a.m. on the day of the fire. The paper had been found in Marcus's wallet, fused to the lining by heat. It rested now like a death warrant. Witnesses were called. A mother clutched the frame of her daughter, her voice breaking as she described the locked doors, the suffocating smoke. A boy of 12 sat stiff in his chair, eyes wide as he told of crawling along the tiles, hearing the lighter click somewhere above the shouting. A cashier trembled as she admitted she tried to grab an extinguisher, only to find it empty, drained before the fire began. Each voice layered memory upon memory, binding the list of dead tighter to the man seated only feet away. The defense offered little. They said nothing about his debts, his divorce, his fractured life. They spoke only of confusion, of possible accident. But the prosecution answered with recordings. The interrogation tape filled the room. Marcus's voice came cold through the speakers. "They never opened the door for me." The words echoed against walls already heavy with silence. A juror shifted, face pale. Another bowed her head. At 11:10 a.m., the prosecutor lifted the charred receipt and held it high. The paper crinkled in its sleeve, edges curled like burned skin. He told the jury this was no coincidence. The lighter had been purchased hours before the flames. The notebook found in Marcus's locker was placed beside it. Pages were turned, names read aloud, birthdays spoken. Some in the gallery gasped when they heard their own relatives' dates listed. The storm that had consumed the market was mapped in ink long before it began. The jury watched him carefully. Marcus sat motionless, hands folded, eyes fixed on the evidence. The chain at his wrists clinked softly when he shifted. He said nothing. He blinked only when the photographs of the dead were shown, faces smiling in life, now held up by parents trembling under the weight of grief. By afternoon, closing arguments ended. The jury filed out. They were gone less than an hour. At 3 p.m. they returned, foreman pale, voice shaking. Guilty on all counts. The words dropped heavy, final, echoing like the alarm bell that had once screamed above locked doors. The judge's sentence came swiftly. Life imprisonment. No possibility of parole. Marcus did not flinch. The gavel struck once. The sound was sharp as a lock snapping shut. Guards moved in, chains rattling. Families wept openly, clutching frames tight to their chests. The gallery's air was thick with sobs and whispered prayers. Marcus stood slowly. The cuffs were tightened, forcing his arms behind him. He was turned toward the exit, boots dragging slightly against polished wood. Reporters outside pressed against the glass, waiting for the image of the condemned. At the threshold he paused. His hands lifted slightly as far as the chains allowed. One finger brushed against soot still lingering at the base of his nails. He brought it to his mouth. His tongue touched ash. His lips curled faintly, not into a smile, but into something darker. He licked the trace of fire as though tasting memory itself. And then he was led away. The market never reopened. Its walls, once painted bright green, were black with soot. Windows gaped, their frames warped by heat. The parking lot cracked under weeds. For months, the smell of burned plastic lingered whenever the wind shifted. People avoided the block. Children crossed the street rather than walk beside the chain-link fence that wrapped the ruins. The town lost its center. Shoppers now drove 40 minutes along back roads to reach the nearest store. The weekly ritual of stopping at Greenway Market vanished. No more chance meetings in the aisles. No more coupons compared over carts. The flyers stopped coming in the mail. Refrigerators were left bare of the paper promises once pinned there. By winter, the building stood silent. Snow drifted through holes in the roof, piling in the empty aisles. Icicles hung from the twisted steel beams, dripping through silence. In spring, rain stained the concrete floor with black streaks. Birds nested in rafters, their calls echoing in the hollow space. The ruins absorbed every season without change. The community carried its wound in small ways. The church canceled its summer fair, unwilling to set up stalls in the shadow of the blackened shell. Families no longer gathered on Saturday mornings. They dispersed, each car heading elsewhere. A boys' baseball team disbanded after practices near the lot grew unbearable, the smell of char rising with each swing of the bat. Inside the local museum, one artifact was added behind glass, a flyer from the week of the fire. Its corner burned, the paper brittle, numbers half erased. It sat under dim light, beside photographs of the victims. Visitors leaned close, staring at the prices of milk and detergent as though they were relics of another era. Children asked why a piece of paper was locked away. Parents whispered answers they could not finish. The notebook recovered from Marcus's locker remained sealed in evidence storage. Few wanted to see it. Its pages, heavy with names and dates, were spoken of only in hushed tones. The ledger of resentment became myth, a story carried through the town like smoke that never cleared. Years later, the building still stood. No investor dared rebuild. The charred beams cast long shadows across the lot at dusk. Teenagers whispered about ghosts in the aisles, daring each other to press against the broken doors. Most did not. One door remained intact, a pane of glass clouded with soot, its edges lined with cracks. It stayed shut, unmoving, as if waiting for a signal that would never come. Passers-by saw their reflections in it, faces bent and gray, stretched by the uneven surface. The glass held them like memory, framing lives that kept walking but never forgot. The doors that had once opened freely now stood locked forever.